That Nintendo Direct announcement of Game Boy and GBA for the Switch Online was pretty exciting, wasn't it? I know we've had access to them via Virtual Console in the past. Oh, right. But getting to play them on either our TVs or on the Switch's portable screen still feels like a huge upgrade, particularly for the Game Boy. Back in the earliest days of the Game Boy, just getting a good look at the screen could be a real challenge, mostly thanks to the lack of any real backlight. Hell, they used to sell a light attachment just so you could play Game Boy in the dark. I actually used to have one. It made playing in the back seat of the car a lot easier than relying on streetlights and the moon. And that's not even mentioning the battery situation. So yeah, you can imagine how getting to play some of these titles on upgraded hardware would be a big improvement, and a lot of fun. Once that Nintendo Direct was over, I suddenly found my brain filling up with all of the Game Boy titles that could potentially come out for this. That handheld had a lot of titles that never got another release. That probably had a lot to do with how many licensed games were put out for the Game Boy. Movie and TV licensed games aren't always the easiest thing to release to a new platform due to issues like licensing rights. But even with that in mind, there are still plenty of Game Boy games I think have a real chance of making the Switch's new Game Boy service. And today, we're going to talk about 10 of them. I know with regular updates, this video has a chance of becoming dated quick, but that's okay. If it means we can get our hands on these titles sooner, that's a price I'm more than willing to pay. And yes, I know we'll be leaving out a lot of games here. Probably some of your favorites. But we know there are way more than 10 great Game Boy titles out there, and we'd love to hear about yours in the comments. I'm Tim from Haruokay, and these are our 10 Game Boy games for the Switch Online. We hope. Fortified Zone. I've seen this one show up at speedrun events before, but never hear a lot of chatter outside of that. That's a bit of a shame, because Fortified Zone for the OG Game Boy is just a solid title. The game puts you in control of two Special Forces agents sent to infiltrate enemy territory. One a master of weapons, the other a master of jumping. F it, why not? Think of a gameplay mix of Metal Gear by way of Blaster Master's overhead shooting sections. Fortified Zone will take you through 4 stages as you navigate through each area via a map accessible from the menu screen. The game also lets you switch characters on the fly. This helps you better navigate certain parts of the map as only one character can jump over obstacles. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. You can also find health and weapon upgrades hidden throughout the level, as well as items that let you unlock certain doors needed to progress further. The opening, character portraits, and boss sprites are all impressive to look at, and it goes a long way in giving the game a solid presentation. The 4-directional movement works to show the game's age a little bit, but it doesn't detract from the experience. For better or worse, you quickly get used to it. This game is also way more Japanese than the box art might suggest. If Nintendo ever re-release this one, hopefully they'll release a Japanese version which gives you the option of a chibi mode. Hey, we like what we like. I also found out in my research that this game is actually part of a series. In Japan, this game is known as Ikari no Yosai and got 2 sequels. One never left Japan, and a 3rd entry came over here as Operation Logic Bomb for the SNES? I gotta get on that. Skate or Die, Bad and Rad. Okay, I'm just gonna come out and say it. Skate or Die is one of the best video game titles of all time. It's just so f***ing 90s, it hurts. Skate or Die, Bad and Rad for the Game Boy is pretty straightforward in its execution. You'll start the game with a choice of 4 stages, and then you skate, or you die. I mean, the game really does deliver on the title. Instead of some kind of competition where you're scored on tricks, Bad and Rad has you skating through dangerous areas of the city, both for victory and for your actual life. You'll be competing in an extreme skateboard event hosted by the evil one. Nope, not that one. El Rad. And it won't take long to understand that the title of this game isn't bullshitting you. You'll be jumping over pits, avoiding knife-wielding thugs, ducking under spikes, hopping over f***ing knives, and even fighting bosses. Skate or Die Bad and Rad is not your average skating game. The game is broken up into 2 sections. A horizontal platforming section and an overhead vertical section. Both take a little getting used to control-wise, but they become more fun the better you get at it. That said, the game is also pretty short. There are 7 stages, including the 4 you can choose at the start of the game. It might take some time to clear each one, but that has a lot to do with the difficulty. Enemies and obstacles do give enough time to react, but not much. You may fare safer by going slower through each level, but where's the fun in that? Of all the games on this list, this one is probably the shortest and most straightforward in terms of overall gameplay. For a $30 game back in the day, that may have been a little too much. But as a quick pick up and play on the Switch? Radical. RType DX. Okay, let's get some horizontal shooters up in here. There were 2 RType games released for the original Game Boy. Both were pretty decent in their own right, but RType DX for the Game Boy Color not only improves on the last two games, it brings them along for the ride. RType DX is actually 5 separate games in one cart. In addition to full Game Boy Color remasters of the first two Game Boy games, we also get RType DX, which is both of those remasters combined together into a single game. On top of that, we also get both the original Game Boy games packed in as well. So when you pick this one up, you know you're getting some real value out of it. Like most horizontal shooters of the time, this game is hard as You'll probably need to die a lot before you start to learn and make any real progress. The visuals are actually pretty great for the Game Boy Color, but you'll likely get the most out of them if you played the originals. The detail in both enemies and stages is so much better, it practically makes the original obsolete outside of nostalgia. Even the bosses get a nice visual upgrade in the color version. You have a default shot that can be charged up, as well as attachments and upgrades found along the way that will greatly improve your chances of finishing this thing. Outside of that though, yeah, the game keeps it pretty simple. Fly left to right, shoot everything in sight, and try not to die. That about sums it up. It's always possible Nintendo could re-release the originals on the service instead, but we'll be keeping our fingers crossed for the DX version. Adventure Island 2: Aliens in Paradise. Let's move on to a mascot who, despite a solid catalog of games, never quite hit the popularity of the likes of Mario, Sonic, or Crash. I'm talking, of course, about the half-naked, ball-hat-wearing, skateboarding hero himself, Master Higgins. The original Game Boy Adventure Island is a simple but solid platformer. The sequel, however, managed to slightly improve upon every aspect of the previous game. After saving your girl, Genie Jungle, come on, man. In the last game, she's once again kidnapped by f***ing aliens. Well, a sequel's gotta do something different, right? Let's go. The gameplay is near identical this time around, but with small improvements. You get access to hammers, skateboards, and eventually rideable monsters, all in your quest to save the girl. To save the girl. The game is reasonably large, with an overworld map separating each stage, bonus level, and occasional boss stage. While gameplay-wise it feels the same as the first game, the challenge factor is up this time around. The game didn't feel quite as easy to get through as the original, but not once did that ever detract from the fun factor. I'd love to see this one make it to Switch Online, if only because Adventure Island is kind of a dead franchise these days, despite God knows how many re-releases. I mean, I get the series never hit the heights of some of the big boys, but I've always found Master Higgins, aka Wonder Boy's outings, to be solid platformers. If we can't get a new game, it would be nice if more people could at least play the old ones. I guess that's all I'm trying to say. Operation C. I feel like this is a game that popped into a lot of people's heads before even clicking on the thumbnail, and who could blame them? Operation C is a stellar Contra game for the original Game Boy. It carries most of the DNA from the NES version, but with its own level and boss designs. Also, your main character is just named Scorpion, which, the music, graphics, gameplay, power-ups, all 100% old school Contra. Considering the hardware, I don't know if we could have possibly gotten a better version of this game for the time. Of course, this also comes with that notorious Contra difficulty. This game is hard as shit, but I guess that's just the way Scorpion likes it. Hard. Over a few playthroughs, you'll probably get better and therefore further in the game. If things still feel like too much, however, they do throw in the Konami code to help you. Wait, what the f is this? Oh, there it is. From gameplay, music, to even the box art. Tell me you wouldn't click on this if you saw it in the game menu. Operation C is a fantastic Game Boy experience. Just don't play it near small children. At least if you're the type to impulsively swear over one-hit deaths. Like me. Micro Machines 1 and 2, Twin Turbo. Micro Machines 1 and 2 Twin Turbo takes a somewhat similar approach to RType DX. Developed by Codemasters, Twin Turbo is a collection of the first two Micro Machines games for the Game Boy, but now with color. And believe me, adding color makes a serious difference to these two games. Just being able to tell the racers apart is a huge improvement, but the stages and menus look immeasurably better with a splash of that GB color. Micro Machines on the NES was a personal favorite of mine back in the day. It just had this childlike imagination to the whole thing. I mean, you're essentially racing different Micro Machines through kid-made tracks ranging from kitchen tables to the bathtub. All the little details, from globs of glue left on the ground to tracks being outlined with Cheerios, there is a ton of creativity and charm in this game. You'll pick from a wide roster of racers in either championship mode, head-to-head mode, or whatever the f this method is. So yeah, this could be a great title to make use of the Switch's wireless multiplayer. The only thing that stops this from being an all-timer is the lack of music on the stages. It was a common thing in the earlier days of the Game Boy, sure, but it would have gone a long way in making an already excellent port truly great. Still, Micro Machines is fun, easy to pick up and play, and charming enough to bring you back for multiple playthroughs. Watch out for those ledges. Ninja Gaiden Shadow. Love Ninja Gaiden on the NES? Odds are you will f***ing love Ninja Gaiden Shadow, if you don't already. Developed by Natsume and published by Tecmo, Ninja Gaiden Shadow acts as a prequel to the NES titles. There's despair on the skyscraper, and Ryu Hayabusa must stop a new enemy named Emperor Garuda. Garuda is trying to resurrect Jaquio, the infuriatingly difficult final boss from the original Ninja Gaiden game. If you can remember that boss fight, you can understand why stopping that might be a priority. The soundtrack is as stellar as its NES counterparts are, and the gameplay more than lives up to them as well. This game actually takes most of its cues from all three games on the NES. It's a prequel to Part 1, uses the music from Part 2, and keeps the hanging mechanic from Part 3. The one huge, game-changing improvement this game makes is with the hit stun. You get knocked upwards, but not back. This saved me from so many potential deaths I lost count. If you made a mod of the original Ninja Gaiden with this one change, it would feel like a very different game. Which I guess in this case means an easier one. Another thing that Ninja Gaiden adds in is a grappling hook. Which immediately got me thinking, why can't the NES ones have a grappling hook? Mind you, I think all games can benefit from the addition of a grappling hook. Zero exceptions. So yeah, I might be a little biased. Speaking of grappling hooks, Bionic Commando Elite Forces. Here's something you don't see every day. A Bionic Commando game published by Nintendo. Set as a sequel to the first Game Boy entry, Bionic Commando Elite Forces puts you in control of one of two characters as you fight against an army called the Avars, led by the evil Arturus. After getting a message from a Commander Joe, which, I mean, it's gotta be f***ing Super Joe, right? It doesn't say it, but you'll set out into enemy territory to prevent them from launching the mysterious Albatross project. You'll pick your character at the beginning and fight your way across more than 20 stages. The map layout is just like the NES Bionic Commando, with regular platforming sections that are broken up by the occasional overhead shooting section. The gameplay features plenty of weapons and item upgrades to keep things interesting. You'll also get to enter comms rooms like in the original, where you can get advice, listen in on enemy communications, and save your game. Oh, and this version also has the occasional sniper section where you can call in a satellite to take out a few enemies. And my only real complaint with that section, honestly, is that I wish there was more of it. While we did get this released on 3DS Virtual Console, it was in Europe only. Seeing this show up on the Switch would be a great chance for more people to see what it's about. But if we're talking about Game Boy Color titles, I could use another release. Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge. I've heard this one referred to as the good Game Boy game. I assume they mean pre-GBA, but I can see the argument. The first Game Boy Castlevania, Castlevania Adventure, was not great. Actually, it was kind of lousy. Like seriously, why are the platforms even positioned like this on the first stage? And what the f*** is with that timer? The sequel, however, is a completely different story. The game is set years after the events of Castlevania Adventure, with the son of the first game's protagonist being kidnapped by Dracula. It's up to Christopher Belmont to once again don the whip and save his kid. This sequel improves upon what came before it in basically every way. Better graphics, better level design, they finally brought back sub-weapons, a non-linear path, clever in-stage mechanics, and even better music. The only thing that the first might have over its sequel is the box art, and even that's a maybe. The game probably won't take very long to beat, but the difficulty will likely stretch that out a little. I mean, Castlevania isn't exactly known for being an easy franchise. That said, the game does have a password system, if memorizing 4 images at a time is your thing. If you're going to play one pre-GBA Castlevania, this is definitely the one to try. I don't see anybody who enjoys the series not liking this game. Seeing this one show up on Switch Online would be amazing, ideally in color. Either way, I'll still take the original version over Castlevania Adventure. Well, unless we're talking the remake. Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid on the Game Boy Color is probably my favorite game on the handheld, from a single-player perspective at least. I mean, it's a new Metal Gear story, albeit a non-canon one, that adapts the franchise to the handheld in a far better way than I was expecting. The game once again puts you in the sneaking suit of protagonist Solid Snake. This time, Snake needs to stop a new band of terrorists that have taken over the former Outer Heaven, the setting of the original Metal Gear game on the NES and MSX. You'll once again parachute in, infiltrate the base, and take out another Metal Gear. Because there's always a Metal Gear. Except for the Shagohod. For a portable version, this game keeps just about everything from the PlayStation 1 entry. We get stealth gameplay, a complex but engaging story, tons of weapons and gadgets, and of course, endless codec dialogue. There are a few features that did get cut, namely being able to grab and choke out enemies along with voice acting. Fortunately, since this game isn't just trying to be a port of the original Metal Gear Solid, those exclusions don't feel as noticeable once you're playing it. One thing a little more unique to the series, at least at the time, was having the game map broken down into individual stages. At the end of each stage, you'll get a results screen with a ranking depending on your performance. Hey, don't judge. Of course, the game is more than just the main story. You also get a separate set of VR missions, as well as a head-to-head mode that will be incredible to see on the Switch. This game impressed the hell out of me the first time I played it. Over 20 years later, it still does. Though my patience for the codec screens isn't what it used to be. If this ever pops up on the Switch's Game Boy service, and you're a Metal Gear fan who's never played this game, this one's an absolute must-play. Hey everyone, Tim here. Thanks for watching and for sticking it out until the end of the video. We've got more videos in the pipeline, hopefully released in a time frame that can be measured in weeks, not months. But we do have more on the way, and we're really excited to share it. In the meantime, if you're inclined to do the usual YouTube things, it really does help us out. And of course, let us know what some of your favorite Game Boy titles are. Until next time, this has been Tim from Haruokay. Stay tuned.